Bidvest. Moving on to Massmart now, they've lodged a complaint with the Competition Commission targeting Pick n Pay, Spar and Shoprite in a bid to end lease exclusivity clauses. For more now, we are joined by Massmart's lawyer, Chris Charter, who is Competition Director at Cliffe Dekker Hofmeyr. Thank you for making the time to join us.
Thanks.
I'm just trying to understand what confidence would you have in this particular case that this is something that Massmart could win. I mean, you've had a similar case which ruled against you, and it certainly seems that this works for the anchor tenants as well as the landlords. So, what are the chances that the Competition Commission might find in your favour?
Yeah, thanks, Nazifa. I think it's a very good case. I think, first of all, you've got to understand that the Commission reluctantly didn't pursue a case against exclusivity on its own. When they decided not to pursue that element of their retail investigation any further, it was really because they didn't have the resources. What they needed, what they're looking for, is someone to bring that complaint and explain to the Commission, how it is that they are being harmed and how it is that consumers ultimately are being left out because of lease exclusivities.
Sorry, Chris, can I just interrupt you there? It's Lindsay Williams in Cape Town. I have this little radio show, and if I said to David Shapiro, David, unfortunately, despite the fact the show is absolutely fantastic and Sasfin would do really well, you can't do that because two other financial services companies are already advertising on the show, and I can't even interview you. That would be an appalling situation. It's such a load of rubbish. If these companies are not confident in their own products and their own pricing and that they can beat the competition, then it's a very sad day for the South African consumer. I'm not saying I'm with you on this one, and I'm not saying I'm supporting you and against the others, but I just think that fair play and capitalism have lost out here.
Lindsay, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's really Massmart's principal concern here, and it should be a concern for us as consumers. If today we need to buy groceries, we'll go to ShopRite, we'll go to Pick n Pay, we'll go to Spar. If we're really lucky, we've got some money, we'll go to Woolworths. That's not really enough competition. And if as a consumer, for me to be told that I can't make use of game as an option, and I need to go to Pick n Pay instead because of exclusivity, I think that's an insult. And quite frankly, what we need is to let as many people as possible who can do so to compete for that shopping dollar.
Chris, if I can come in here, do you think that the landlords are actually celebrating the fact that you're bringing it to the Competition Commission? Because they signed a contract, they can't do it, but do you think they'll give you the support in the sense, where they are subject to an exclusivity contract? Because I believe it's not part of modern contracts. It doesn't form part of modern leases. So these are old leases.
That's right. I think exclusivity in lease agreements in malls in particular has had its day, and I think that day was probably 40 years ago. And I think a lot of landlords are stuck with that. They probably didn't think too much about it at the time when there really weren't any other options. It was Pick n Pay or Pick n Pay. That's who you'd contract with. So granting exclusivity 40 years ago, wouldn't have been a strange thing to do. I think that these are surviving now is a problem as much for the landlords as it is for someone who desperately wants to compete, like in fact Game does with Massmart.
What does the future look like in terms of the legal battle that you're likely to have to endure? I mean, in particular, we know that this would be good news for the consumer, but what are the practical steps that you need to get through if the consumer is to be victorious at the end of this?
Right. Well, I mean, the complaint's with the Commission. The Commission will spend a bit of time wrapping their mind around the complaint. And then it'll be all systems go to prosecute that complaint, we anticipate. We're hopeful that sanity will prevail and that at some point the retailers will say, well, let's get on with the game of competing. Let's not rely on our exclusivities, historical ability to keep competition out. Let's rather compete. What better way to hone your competitive instinct if you're a retailer in this environment than to compete? So there's every prospect that retailers might say, well, okay, let's go forward on a competitive footing. If not, then along with the Commission, we'll be ready and willing and able to prosecute this in front of the tribunal.
Speaking about able, Chris, do you think it's all to do with the cross-selling aspect of it? Because Game is not a food store, but you want to put Foodco in there. I mean, Able wasn't a furniture seller, but it became a furniture seller. Is it something to do with that, or is that just an aside?
Well, I think Lindsay, I think it's very much something to do with that. In other words, Game is probably amongst all the possible horses to bet on in order to become a key competitor to the incumbent retailers. Game has a couple of key elements. It's got an existing game, an existing brand. It's got a brand that people trust. It's got a footprint of stores throughout South Africa. It's got the ability to leverage its general merchandise offering into fresh food. So if you're a consumer, you can say, not only do I buy my toaster from Game, but I can buy the bread to put in the toaster and the Marmite to spread on it, or the peanut butter if you prefer that. So at the end of the day, Game does provide a unique value proposition to consumers. The tragedy of the whole thing is they're not being allowed to present that opportunity to consumers because of a contract which has had its day.
Is this only the grocers or the retailers, or do you find similar contracts signed by people like Truworths or Foschini, or is it open competition there?
It's typically with the grocers. Usually, if you're trying to operate a big mall, you'll want some multinational, some national players in food retail, in clothing. But you'll find in most malls you'll have a Foschini's and an Edgar's and a Woolworths. So typically there's space for those to compete. You'll have a lot of boutique stores, and that doesn't seem to be a problem, neither for Foschini's and Edgar's and Woolworths, nor a problem for the boutique stores. And it's curious to me that this when it comes to food, bread and butter, that this playing field is reserved for a select few.
Chris, we're almost out of time, but I just want to understand what's changed about the strategy you're taking to the Competition Commission that failed at the Gauteng Divisional Court, where you came back and it was ruled against you.
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that at a civil court, competition law doesn't come into it. So in terms of the Competition Act, a civil judge doesn't in fact have the jurisdiction to decide a case based on whether a particular provision of a contract is anti-competitive. That judge is only able to decide on the contractual merits, which, as we know, is based on, Roman Dutch law from thousands of years ago. So in order to leverage the Competition Act, that's an entirely different forum altogether. All that the civil litigation shows is that Massmart really has no option but to pursue a competition law complaint, because the civil courts won't clear the decks.
Well, that's a big thank you from Chris Chart. He's a competition director at Cliffe Dekker Hofmeyr, and we hope to be getting updates as they go through this particular legal battle. Well, in extension of this conversation, we asked our viewers whether retailers should be granted exclusive anchor tenant status. Some had interesting responses. At Charmington says they all have different strategies. Giving them exclusivity is shortchanging the customer. And Unati at large says no better case of anti-competitive and collusive behavior than this. So certainly seems like the Twitter sphere is aligned with Chris Charter on that one. Let's take a short break here in Johannesburg, but let's take more business tonight right after.